Good evening, everyone. This is Alex Books, and this is my co-host Roger Sutherland. This is the Guitar Gear Locker, and this is episode
16.
16. And tonight, I'm glad to have my old friend on the show tonight, the legendary Lee Harrison from Monstrosity and many other bands and projects that he's done. And not to mention that Lee is not, known as just one of the best drummers on the planet, but also a guitar player, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist. And thanks for coming on tonight, Lee.
No problem, brother. You got it.
Yeah. So I guess we'll get into how you got into music and what led you to pick up playing the drums and the guitar.
Right. So originally I was possessed by Kiss in 1977. Originally wanted to be a guitar player, but my dad, he got my guitar and I was trying to play it left-handed, and he wouldn't let me play it left-handed. And, it kind of discouraged me as far as, it just wasn't as fun, trying to play it right-handed originally. And so I kind of I don't know, not to say I didn't pursue it, but it just kind of like one of those things where I just went out and rode my BMX bike instead. And then, a little later, at some point, he's my dad was a pilot, and one of his pilot buddies had an apartment complex over in Coral Gables. I grew up in Miami, and he was a drummer at the University of Miami, and he was like in the University of Miami jazz band. And he later in the 90s went on to become the drummer for the Bee Gees for like 10 years. But anyway, this was before all that. He had gone to Berkeley College, so he's a really killer player. He was just never mind anything that he did, just as a player alone, he was awesome. But my mom would cart me over there on Wednesdays, and I would take drum lessons from him. And he pretty much started me off with like 30-minute lessons. We'd do like 15 minutes of drum pad and working out a stick control, the book Stick Control, and then we would do like 15 minutes drum set. And just that first time getting on the real drum set was just life changing. It was like, wow. It really inspired me that this is cool as hell, and this is something I want to do. So from there, I was a drummer, and I started with my dad. We went out in the garage, and he made me a little wood pad, like it was like a wood block thing, and we put like an inner tube tire on it, and that was my drum pad. And then that year for Christmas, I got a snare drum. So then for a while I had like cardboard boxes with a snare drum and like a wood pad, and I would use like a basketball and a garbage can as my ride cymbal. Like the pinging of the basketball was my ride cymbal,
Right.
And I would just play along to records, Cheap Trick at the time, stuff like that. It was kind of pre-metal, the old, all that stuff. Anyway, so I had two neighborhood guys that I was playing with, a guy named Brace Boone and a guy named Brian Hart. And Brian would come over more often, we had our little simple songs. We'd do like Cars cover, You're All I Got Tonight. That was one of our hits there. And, different little, Cocaine, Eric Clapton, just easy, cheesy kind of stuff. But, it's what we were doing at 9 years old, and just, after we would get done jamming, I would pick up his guitar, and it's a right-handed guitar. And so I was playing, and I just more or less fell into playing right-handed guitar just because I was around guitar players that played right-handed. And it just, and now I'm so glad my dad forced me to do that, because, being a left-handed guitar player, while, it's not the end of the world, but it made my life so much easier, in the long run.
Right.
So anyway, from there, and then I don't know, the next Christmas, I think I finally got a 5-piece drum set, and I did that, but then I moved to like the West Coast over here in Florida, Sarasota area, and there was really no one to jam with, and I finally met some in high school, I met these two guys, but they were like, I was 13 and they were 16, and, they were like, they turned me on to Maiden and stuff like that, all the, kind of heavier stuff. I was already into metal, but they got me, even more like playing and we would do like Bastille Day from Rush, and just stuff that, kind of older stuff, but was killer, and so we would do covers like that, and they were kind of like the only guys around, but they were into kind of partying, and so it was kind of they had no desire to like take it anywhere, they just wanted to jam in a garage, so to speak, and do it that way. But since there was really no other guys, and they would like half the time they'd be off doing other stuff, I ended up taking a tape recorder, and I would record myself, doing the drums, and then I would put that tape in my stereo, and then I would play that out of my speakers, and then I would record guitar along with it, so that's kind of how I started doing the multi-instrumental thing, and just out of force of just because there was no one else around, I just had to, and I was hungry to do this, I was like, from the gate, I was, this is what I was doing, since I was 7 years old. I pretty much decided, that was what I wanted to do.
Hey, Lee, if I can jump in for a second, I have a quick question before I forget it. So I have the same predicament. I mean, mine even includes a BMX bike. So left-handed, I'm left-handed, also play right-handed, and father, same kind of thing, and availability of left-handed guitars back then, they just weren't around. So I get the question every once in a while from customers that come in that have, young sons or daughters or whatever, and they know I'm a lefty that plays right-handed. What do you think? Do you think that they ask me, should I teach my son or daughter left-handed or right-handed or which? And I pretty much tell them to go right. What do you think?
I tell them right too. I don't know. Are you familiar with Rick Beato?
Yep. Yeah.
Well, his son is, learning to play guitar, and on his podcast or whatever, he said that, his son Dylan or whatever is learning left-handed guitar, and I even like sent him a, comment or whatever, teach him right-handed, teach him right-handed. I don't think he did though, but
yeah.
So yes, I definitely suggest, in the long run, it just makes it easier. And even on the drums, like I play a right-handed kit, but I play open-handed.
Right.
So, and I do both actually, because he taught me right-handed, and as a left-handed person, I'm actually, I'm a little quicker on my left hand. So to do those fast, the skank beats and the Slayer beats, whatever you want to call it, if anything that gets really, really fast, I tend to jump over to open-handed just because it's, I can play faster that way. But
and I guess that kind of gives you some versatility. Also, you can do what works best for you. Left.
And what I found with the drumming is if you work your weak hand, your main hand will come along. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, and being the ambidextrous thing, I ended up working my weak hand to make it stronger. It's still not perfect by any stretch, and I could do so much more, but I end up writing songs or writing lyrics or doing, what I mean? If I wanted to be just a drummer, you know what I mean, I could push myself a lot further with it. But definitely just what I've noticed is pushing the weak hand, make, the stronger hand will come along with it.
Right. Definitely. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Dave Lombardo is left-handed but plays right-handed as well. I don't know if you've heard that.
I didn't know. No, I never heard that.
Well, it's kind of weird because I always think it's a disadvantage because, and I've complained to Alex and a million other people about, I don't feel like I can pick as fast because I'm picking with my weak hand, if you will. But then I've heard people that are left-handed, Brett Papa is a phenomenal guitar player, and he's online also. He was talking about he's left-handed. And he said, I feel like there's an advantage to fretting with my left hand, which is my strong hand, and the more coordinated hand and things like that. So I guess it's a
Right.
toss.
Yeah. I don't, my picking hand isn't a problem for the most part. You know, I don't,
Right.
I can, I feel pretty, you know, I worked at it though, you know, just
Right.
playing old
My
Metallica
picking hand is
stuff.
probably more me. It's more me
Um,
than being left-handed.
So what was the first, I guess, band that you were working with that really started to kind of get out there and all playing live? Because I'm pretty sure I remember when me and you first met, I think you recently left Malevolent Creation, and I think you done some work with I think you filled in for Atheists, I think, even prior to that, and a few other bands
that,
in there.
so the story with all that was, you know, um, where I was and like living with my parents in Sarasota area. Um, there was just nobody there. So I would go back down to Miami and I had like my childhood buddies down there. And one of them, this guy named Robbie, he ended up introduced me to Cynic. And it was when Cynic was like a thrash band. They weren't jazzy like they became.
Mhm.
But and that's where I actually met Mark Van Erp, our original bass player, because he was in Cynic at the time. So when I was 18, well, when I was 17, like, and then it was 17 and a half, I guess, I went down and I saw it was a local show with Cynic and another band called Paramore and a band called Paradox, which was Ralph Paz from Metal Blade, if you know Ralph. But
Mhm. Yeah.
he they were like a low, you know, I ended up meeting a lot of the guys and like that I didn't really know, hadn't met when I actually lived there. People like Morbid Mario, and there was a bunch of
Mhm.
people that, you know, just kind of from the Miami scene. And I went down there and just saw Cynic, and they were already together. They were, you know, this was like you know, they were playing the Cameo Theater, which was kind of a big place, and it was like it was inspirational, you know, that these guys are doing it, what I want to do, you know. So
Mhm.
the guy Robbie, he had this singer guy for me, and I ended up moving, like coming down to as soon as I turned 18, I packed my van up with my drums, and I went to Miami, and I lived with this singer guy Bobby, and we were basically hanging around with Cynic because they were already together and doing stuff. Like I said, they had a warehouse, and you know, it was kind of a party thing too. People were, you know, hanging around partying and whatnot, but they were actually, you know, serious about their instruments and serious about trying to do stuff. So for the first, I don't know, you know, basically the thing with the singer really didn't work out. And we had a guitar player from Homestead that would drive up. He drove up a couple times, and it was too far for him to drive, and it just never really panned out. But you know, seeing Cynic, and you know, I became friends with Mark Van Erp, like I said, and me and him hit it off, and me and that singer kind of dissolved. Whatever, we just wasn't working out. So I moved in with Mark Van Erp, and so I was hanging with him, and eventually there was a local band from Miami called KGB, and they were kind of a crossover DRI type band, and they had a warehouse down in the Kendall area of Miami near Tamiami Airport, and more or less worked it out where Cynic was going to move into that warehouse, and I was going to start jamming with KGB. And so me and Mark ended up, there was like a little office upstairs with like little, you know, little studio apartment type thing. So me and Mark shared that upstairs, and then we would, you know, we lived at the warehouse, and we were kind of security too, so because we'd be there the whole time, you know, and it was cheap for me. It was like $50 a month for rent. And I just, you know, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to jam all day. And
Sure.
so we would fill up my van. I had a van, and we'd fill up my van with gas, and I would help Cynic, you know, pass out flyers. And if they had a show, we'd pack Sean's drums into the back of my van, and I'd take them up to the shows. And but then I would, you know, jam with Mark and stuff like that when it was just me and him. You know, we would jam a lot, just bass and drums. And then the guy from KGB, their bass player, he kind of taught me a lot about drums. He understood like the upbeat and the downbeat, and understanding the kind of because I had been playing a lot of rock beats previously, you know what I mean? So he kind of got me up to speed with understanding the timings and stuff like that. Anyway, so from KGB, I ended up playing my first show with them at the Cameo Theater, and it was KGB, Cynic, and was it Malevolent? It might have even been Malevolent had just moved from Buffalo, and they had in Buffalo they had a killer drummer who could like just slam out double bass like really, really good. And then when they moved to Fort Lauderdale, they had this guy Joe who really didn't play double bass. He wasn't that good at it, and they would complain about him and stuff. So, when I'd see Phil at the Treehouse or see Phil here or wherever, he's like, dude, I need to get you in. I need a drummer that can play double bass. That was his big thing at the time, double bass. And it really pushed people like Sean Reiner, all of a sudden he started playing double bass all the time. And, I was kicking in on my double bass, and Alex Marquez, people, everybody was going double bass crazy just because Phil was there, saying, dude, I need somebody who can play double bass, and he was just a double bass freak, he was fanatical about it. So I ended up leaving KGB and moving from Miami to join Malevolent. And then, so like for that 1989, I was in Malevolent, and that was the transition from when like the Florida scene really hit. And before that though, I did join Hellwitch for like 2 weeks. But they were in Boca Raton, and it was like too far to drive, so it didn't work out. But he was, Pat was another one who really, he taught me, and he's like, dude, you got to play the super fast beat. He introduced me to the blast, and like he called it the super fast beat. You got to learn the super fast beat. So and he was a great inspiration too. So, but with Malevolent, that's when it was like, okay, now we started playing this place at the Treehouse, and we do it every Saturday, like every other week, and it was just, Phil, when he moved down from Buffalo, he brought like all his cousins and his brother. He had all these like relatives with him. So like when we'd show up at a show, we'd have like 30 people with us. There was like this built-in crowd, and so like the club owners, they didn't know who they were, to them, we were bringing people, and that's all that they cared about. So like we kind of blew up just because of that,
Right.
And then the Florida thing, we were driving up, we started hearing, word, Morbid Angel was breaking out, and Obituary came out with Slowly We Rot, Sepultura with Beneath the Remains, so like Morrisound, all that. So we were driving up to Tampa kind of like once a month. We went and saw, it was kind of weird because it was Chuck from Death. It was the Leprosy lineup, and Leprosy was already out in stores, but yet they were opening up for Morbid Angel, who didn't even have an album out. It was like a weird thing. Like Morbid Angel was that big in Tampa, that they could draw like that, and that Chuck would be opening up for them. So I remember we drove up for that show. I met Chuck, and briefly met the Morbid guys. I don't think they would remember it at that point. They wouldn't remember me, but later on, obviously, I met them and knew who they were. But that was kind of like how we kind of integrated the South Florida scene with the Tampa scene. And there was this like kind of historical show that happened at this, where it was like an airport hangar in near MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa. And it was Amon, which was Deicide before they were Deicide, Nocturnus, Obituary, and then Morbid was supposed to fly. And like people came from like everywhere. Like, people were flying in from Jersey and New York, and I met Scott Burns there, all kinds of, Mike Browning, all these people, so that was kind of like a meeting of the scenes, so to speak, and that was Chuck brought James Murphy out. That was like the first time that James Murphy kind of got introduced as the new death guitar player, and it was kind of like a big scene hang, that everybody was there. And from there, like this band Elysium, they invited me out to Morrisound, and so I got to go see Morrisound, and that was kind of how I integrated into that world, and not long after, we're recording there, and doing that with Monstrosity. But any questions, or you want me to keep going? Because I got this.
Oh yeah, it's I remember I heard about you playing with Hellwitch before. I don't know, maybe you told me this, or maybe Pat told me this years ago. I don't remember. I'm curious. Is there any maybe rehearsals floating around of that?
He had a video, but I guess his ex-girlfriend like stole his collection at the time, and like it went with that. So no, there's nothing.
Because I mean, you're like perfect fit for for Pat's crazy riffs. Like that would have made sense perfectly back then.
Yeah, it was a challenge though. I was still pretty green at that point, but it was definitely fun but challenging.
So you recorded maybe like it was like a last demo Malevolent did or something like that, right? Didn't you
Okay, so
record
they had like 3 demos. So they did the first one in Buffalo with that guy I was telling you about with the killer double bass.
Yeah, I had that.
We did the second demo in '89, and that was kind of before the death metal boom thing really hit. That we were still basically Slayer type thrash. We didn't, and then that's when we started going to Tampa and stuff, and then we kind of incorporated more death metal elements into what we were doing. We actually went, well, that was after, but we were scheduled to do that third demo with Scott Burns, and me and Phil drove up to Tampa, and we went to the Atheist show, and I ended up jumping off the stage, and I messed my hand up, so we ended up having to cancel the session. And then in the end, things with Phil didn't work out. I mean, long story there, but whatever. So I wasn't in Malevolent anymore, and that's when they got Mark Simpson, and they ended up doing the third demo with Mark Simpson. But a lot of those songs I wrote, like Remnants of Withered Decay, like those are, the first half of that song's my guitar riffs, but I was never credited. Title's mine. I gave it the Remnants of Withered Decay is my title, and like Decadence Within, I think like the second half, like that, the whole section there, that actually it's the intro section, me and Phil kind of back and forth worked that out. So a lot of that third demo I wrote or was involved with writing, but I didn't get to play on it, and then from there they did their thing, and I was out doing Monstrosity. But when I left Malevolent Creation, Mark Van Erp joined Malevolent Creation, and they were, I don't know how long it was, but maybe, let me see what it would have been. It would have been November '89. And then I think by July '89 or July '90, they had already gotten the Roadrunner deal. And I actually sent in the videotape for them to get signed, like to show Monty that, hey, we have this following here. And the video looked impressive with the kids just going nuts, and it was really Phil's family, a lot of them, but whatever. So like things had already been moving towards the Roadrunner deal and all that. And July '90 is when I had met Ted Hartz from Ex Mortis, and I ended up, I was thinking I was going to be playing in Ex Mortis because I didn't know Lee Coates. I didn't know any of those guys, really. I just knew Ted because he'd come down to Tampa. And so I got a plane ticket and went up to flew into Washington. Ted picked me up at the airport, and then we drove up to George's house and picked George up. And that's when I met George. And that's when we drove up to Philly to Annie's house. And that's when I met you. So that whole thing was kind of like a transitioning weekend, so to speak, in the whole thing. And
I remember actually, before meeting you, Ted had talked about you, and he was just like, I got this drummer, and he's just like the sickest drummer on the planet, and all this stuff, and yeah, it's funny because I remember you guys kind of sitting together with George and Ted, and you guys were gonna do this band, and then fast forward, within a very brief time, things didn't work out with Ted, and you and George just, got the Monstrosity thing together. And I remember, I think you guys might have came back up and you played the demo or gave me the demo, and I was just like, wow, this is fucking nuts, and it seemed like at least it seemed, back then everything's kind of a blur too, it was so long ago, but, I just remember it kind of came together pretty quickly.
Right, it did, because if you remember, so that was July of '90 when we went to G. Willikers and we saw Ripping Corpse, Malevolent, Hell Witch.
Yeah.
And when I flew home and Mark, that tour ended with Mark or whatever, he came back like, I don't know, not even a week later, and he called me. He's like, dude, I got kicked out, Phil kicked me out. So I looked at that as like, okay, well, there's, we got George, we got Ted, and there's a bass player, and so I packed up my drums again and went down with Mark Van Erp, and we started writing songs like right away. And the intention was to have Ted be part of it, and that was August of '90, and we had this friend of ours named Ross. He had a club in West Palm Beach that was kind of starting to do like, they had Deicide and they were starting to do big shows or whatever. And he's like, dude, we got Massacre coming. You want to open for Massacre? And we really didn't even really have the lineup together barely, but I was like, let me see if I can pull it together, So I called George. I said, hey man, I got this, we got a gig with Massacre if we want it, Me and Mark got these songs, we've been working. We had this guitar player that we kind of knew that he wasn't going to be the guy, but we more or less used him to write these songs and to rehearse with, made it fun to rehearse. And he was cool with it. He didn't mind. So so we already had we were working on song 3 and 4 already by the time that this was happening. And when I called Ted, he was like, well, I don't know, I want to write my songs and I want it to be, we want to throw out your songs and do it my way and this and that, this and that. So
you would have been waiting forever.
Right. I was like, well, so basically I called back George. I said, dude, if you want to do it, man, and then right around not long after that, John Rubin, he got fired from Malevolent. So, and, so to me, there's your second guitar player, you know what I mean? I wasn't even looking to replace Ted or anything yet. You know what I mean? Ted was always going to be involved originally, but he kind of shot him, he took himself out of the equation pretty much. And then, George came down, we got him a bus ticket, and, I had written the lyrics. So, I taught him gave him the lyrics, and he was happy with that because he didn't write lyrics, he said, so we ended up playing that show with Massacre, which actually went horribly. It didn't ended up changing the set list at the last minute. Instead of playing, we always played the song in a certain order, and then the night of the show we decided we were going to switch it up and play the last song first, and it was basically playing the hardest song first, and we just it just ended up, it was just a nightmare. But then so the second show was with Malevolent at that same club, and it was kind of redemption because we were all ex-Malevolent and we were just hungry to kick their ass so bad. We just went into rehearsal and went nuts, and that's when Rob Barrett from Cannibal, well, he wasn't in Cannibal, he was in Solstice, but that's when Rob Barrett ended up jamming with us, and we killed it on that second show and really did good. We went and recorded the demo. We pulled together like $700 or $800 and did a 4-song demo in Miami, and we had been talking with Borovoy and Monty. We were calling them every other day, just gossiping bullshit, what's going on with this, what's up with that, As soon as we get our demo, man, we're going to send it to you, dude. You're going to be blown away, just talking shit, basically. But that's what we did. We sent him the demo once we got done, and we were doing mail all, like crazy. And Ted actually came, but like after, like he saw that we were kind of having some success with the demo, like he wanted to give it another shot, and he actually flew down and hung out with us for like 2 weeks. And like, dude, he would go in the band room and like he would just practice whammy dives for like an hour, dude. He would just go. Like he was so obsessed with Trey, you know what I mean? I get it, Trey's killer and all, but like he would just do whammy. Go, we'd hear him in there going.
I remember him doing the same thing. He would never practice. He would just make a bunch of nonsense or whatever, and
Dude, play some riffs. Let's hear something. Something. And then Monty actually set it up where James Murphy came down to we were gonna see if that was gonna be a thing, because he had just got kicked out of Obituary, and Roadrunner were kind of looking to kill two birds with one stone, and so they wanted James to try out with us, and so he did it. And Ted Hartz was still sitting on the couch, you know what I mean? And, it's like, dude, we're moving on, you're just whammy diving over here, it's like. And there was like something with his personality too that wasn't really clicking. I don't really remember exactly what it was, but he was all offended that we had James Murphy, like he's not death metal, blah blah blah. He's a thrash guy, or it was like something of those deals, like he wasn't death metal enough to be whatever. So, but anyway, it didn't work out with James either. So he basically came down and left the next day, and it didn't really go anywhere. But that was kind of that, and then. Just to finish off that whole section of the story, we finally got the demo done, and we were talking to Borovoy and Monty, and they were just like, well, dude, we signed, Suffocation, we've signed Immolation, we've got this and that. It's like, dude, we're not going to sign any more death metal. We're basically, but we got these friends of ours over in Germany, Nuclear Blast, they're a cool label. And at the time, Nuclear Blast was nothing, so to speak. They had Righteous Pigs, and they had like some other small stuff, but they really hadn't become Nuclear Blast. They had no American distribution. It was just like a European thing. But to be honest, dude, we were just impressed that they had printed CDs. We were like, that's how hungry we were. I just wanted, I wanted to be able to hold my music in my hand, Right. And so like. We talked to them, and we figured, we're going to hit these guys up, and, we'll be a bigger fish in a smaller sea type thing,
Mm-hmm.
But, okay. And that's how we ended up with Nuclear Blast and the record deal and all that. That's kind of the rest is history.
Yeah. I was curious how that all transpired, with the whole Nuclear Blast thing. Because I remember, obviously Relapse was up, at the probably around the same time you were coming up.
Yeah, they actually hit us up they wanted to release 2 songs off the demo before they were even connected with Nuclear Blast. So technically, Relapse was our first offer of a record deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I hear every time we do an interview, you all make it sound very easy. That like we just went. You actually said, "Well, we just went in and we just wrote some songs, and it sounds so easy." And I know it's not. But so, do you think nowadays? I mean, not necessarily. You did that. You get signed by a label. You do demos, and I know you all have known each other and been in this business a long, long time. Do you think it is easier for bands that are up and coming now to do that now than it was then with all the technology, or are there new challenges now?
As far as actually doing it?
Yeah. I know writing is writing. It's hard.
I would think it would be easier just because, everybody's got a computer now,
Right.
Back then, we were happy as hell just to have a 4-track recorder,
Right.
Yeah.
A little cassette 4-track thing, that's how we would write demos back then.
Right.
And get guys in a room together and jam it. Where nowadays it's like, okay, this guy's living over here and this guy's over here, and we're going to send some files back and forth and click track or whatever. And
it was about finding the right people that were dedicated into doing it instead of finding 10 reasons why you shouldn't do it.
Right.
You'd always end up with those guys that would sit there and tell you, oh, this and that, and just talk you out of doing it. It's like, no, dude, we're doing this. Come on.
Right.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to hear these stories because I mean, somebody like me that isn't in the business, we had no clue how the songwriting, going in, cutting demos, and now, like you said, anybody can be anywhere and you can work. Back then, it had to be a challenge because you had to be near each other.
Yeah, and in those days, there was less bands. Today there's like everybody's got a band, everybody's got a record label.
Right.
You had to, you had to be good, to get a deal, and you had to put.
The record labels were the gatekeepers, and you had to get past the gatekeepers,
Yeah,
right.
Yep, that's the truth.
So now everybody has a record label and everybody has a band.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So you remember, like the first tour you guys did? I guess like I remember you guys went to Europe first, or was that?
Yeah, that was pretty much the first tour. Pestilence and Monstrosity. And I remember talking with Michael from Nuclear Blast, and he's like, yeah, we got you the tour opening for Pestilence, and I said something like, how much are we gonna make, and he's like, how much are you gonna make? Yeah. He's like, we're paying to have you on this tour, you're not gonna make anything. He's like,
yeah,
you're gonna sell T-shirts and pay us back, like. And that I remember being I actually have the phone conversation recorded. It's great of me like realizing what I'm not getting, like, to me that just made no sense, What do you mean I'm not going to get paid?
Everybody was back in those days, It's just like, well, we gave you in advance. You're paying for the tour bus. You're paying for everything.
Yeah.
You're paying, and you're paying for you got to pay us back for the recording budget, and
Yeah, that tour cost us $14,000.
What?
Yeah, with the plane tickets and the T-shirts and just everything. Yeah. Hotels, because we ended up spending a week in Eindhoven in between some shows. So we had to pay for hotel for all four of us or whatever, and five of us.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and the album cost us $14,000. So for the first album, we were basically in debt $28,000.
And I don't guess at that point of your life, you're going like, well, let's chalk it off as an experience.
Right.
Not at that point.
It was definitely, and they said we sold at the time, and they were like, well, you sold 40,000 copies of the record. It was like, well, $1 an album, there's $40,000. We're at least worth $1 an album. I don't give a. I don't care what you say, you know what I mean?
Right. So
as far as I'm concerned, you got paid back. And then there was this issue over the publishing, because just how the publishing works, it's they can't really cross collateralize it on the royalties, and I don't know, it's a long story I really don't want to get into because I don't want to talk bad about it.
It just seems to me, again, just listening to people talk, it seems like everywhere along the way, you guys have so money in your damn pockets. Yeah. That's just my opinion. I may be totally wrong.
Yeah, it's got it was kind of our fault too. We'd show up to a tour or a show or whatever with one T-shirt. Back in the 90s, we didn't realize, gee, we should have 3 or 4 T-shirts and different designs. It was kind of Vader who taught us that, hey, you can actually make a living doing this, if you do your merchandise right, and
right.
We were just showing up with one T-shirt design and I'm happy that we even had that,
Yeah.
We didn't realize that if we would have had all that other stuff and various designs and different, long sleeve, all that stuff,
Sure. Yeah.
That was, when I'd say around 2000s is when things started to change and we started to make a little more money.
Right.
And I actually quit my day job in 2001, and I've been more or less doing music ever since.
Nice.
So
I guess let's like switch a little bit and fast forward a little bit. And I'm curious, what it was like for you to kind of step out, in front, away from the drums. I know you went out with Obituary, you filled in, played guitar, and and then doing Terrorizer, with Pete playing guitar. I mean, did it, was it kind of like a breather to kind of get out front and, to be playing guitar instead of being the guy back there with the drums?
It was always kind of a dream of mine, how that started was I had this guy, Matt Laporte, who was in John Oliva's Pain, the dude from Sabotage. And he was a killer guitar player. And he ended up hooking up with Donald and John from Obituary. And they were doing a side project called the Tardy Brothers. And well, actually before that, me and Matt did this thing with Midnight from Crimson Glory. And he brought me in on that. And that I kind of became, they already had a drummer with that situation. So I was either going to play bass or guitar. And in the end, I ended up like on some songs on the whole band, other songs there, Matt was like the band, so it just, that's kind of how like I started becoming taken more seriously as a guitar player, through that. And then the Tardy Brothers things happened, and Donald wanted to kind of do a thing where we switched off, like he wanted to play guitar. And then, so like I would play a few songs on guitar, he would play a few songs on guitar type thing. We would switch back and I'd play drums, when he's playing guitar. And that was fun. And so basically I learned that they had an album worth of material, and I learned pretty much, I'd say 8 of the 10 songs I learned on both drums and guitar, so at any given moment we could just switch and play whatever. And that was really fun, that was great. And it kind of got me in the Obituary camp, and that's when I started hanging around with them. And then Terry had just gotten reformed with Rick for Massacre, and he had a tour with Massacre for Europe. And Donald asked me, he's like, "Hey man, can you play bass for Obituary for this? We got a show in Mexico and Terry's going to be gone. Can you learn a set?" And so I went over there and I just filmed Trevor playing the songs with Donald, just so I could see what he's playing, get the notes right. And I spent my Christmas vacation like learning those songs on bass. And then come like, I don't know, the first week of January or something, Terry's like, "Hey man, I'm not, the tour got canceled or whatever, so I'll be there. You don't have to worry about it." And I was kind of bummed out. I was like, "Damn, dude, I just spent my whole Christmas vacation. But tell you what, man, can I at least come out and jam the songs one time with you guys, just to say that I did it, just because I learned it all, I spent, and I just want to do it one time. I'll be, I'll shut up and go away." But then I ended up going out there and jammed the set with them, and they were like, "Hey, on one of the breaks, they were like, 'Hey, man, we can bring an extra guy to Mexico if you want to come. You can come out, and play and whatever." So that's what happened. That's how and then the same thing, "Hey, man, we need somebody to go for this South American tour, if you want to do it." So I ended up doing like, some really big shows actually then down in South America. Like we did the Destruction in Ecuador, like Obituary Destruction in Ecuador. That was a really killer, insane show. That was nerve-wracking because my guitar strap, the strap lock came off right in the middle of the show. And I got Destruction standing behind me with their arms all crossed, like staring me down, like, "What's going on here? Who's this guy?" So I got, I'm not trying to play with no, guitar strap, basically, a heavy ass Les Paul, but I made it through the gig, and then afterwards I found the little screw on the ground and I ended up saving it for the next gigs. But we played this show called the Metal. It was, I don't know, it was this big arena in Santiago, and it was like Anthrax, Testament, blah blah blah, like all these big names, and that was like that was probably one of the most fun shows I've ever played. It was just everything we had was tight, and it was nice. My problem with Obituary was that I didn't play lead guitar. I was a rhythm guitar player, and they needed somebody like Ralph or somebody who could really belt out the leads, and so that's why it wasn't a long-term thing, because I'm sure if I was Yngwie Leestein, you know, I probably would have got the gig. But,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I'm just sitting here trying to think of his fans coming out, going like, "Wait till you see this drummer named Lee Harrison. Holy fuck, he's playing the bass. He's playing the guitar. He's singing."
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did the whole Terrorizer thing? How did that happen?
So not long after all that ended, I ran into Pete. Pete had lived. He had moved to Spain for a couple of years. He had a wife over there and was living over there. Had been out of Morbid Angel. Um, he had done that third Terrorizer album with the crew out in California, and they were kind of, I don't know what was going to happen with them, whether they were going to try to, I think they were just starting to work on a new album. But Pete came back to town. He was like sober. He was very clear minded, you know. It was like a different Pete than I had remembered, you know, because he was partying, he was kind of crazy, and he was, you know, kind of wild or whatever. He had found God, and he had come back and he had found God, and he was real, like I said, sober and clean. You could just see the clearness in him, you know, and he was just kind of, I don't know, back to earth, so to speak. And I was like, "Hey man, you know, you jamming? What are you doing?" He's like, you know, not really. I got my drums in my, you know, back. He has a little shack shed type thing out in his backyard, which he had like an electric kit set up in the back there. I was like, "Dude, you know, let me come over. I want to jam World Downfall with you, man," because I had learned it like in '94 just for fun, you know. It's kind of an easy album to play, and it was fun to learn and just something to do. And I'd kind of forgotten it since then, but I knew like most of the songs. I just didn't remember all of them. But I went back and I brushed up on them. And like one Wednesday, I drove, you know, I got a Framus Cobra and packed my guitar up and drove over to his house, and we played, you know, a bunch of the songs off World Downfall, you know, and it went really good. And like, yeah, man, it's fun, dude. We should do it, you know, do it next week, you know. And so the next Wednesday I went back and did it again, and then it was like, oh, we should, you know, do this, that, and the other. And then it kind of was like, you know, do we know anybody that could play bass and sing, you know? And I knew Sam, and he was a guitar player, but I knew he could play the bass and sing. So I just, you know, I ran into him at an Yngwie concert, no less, and ended up talking him into it. And so he came out, and we, you know, started with like 4 or 5 songs and moved it, you know, within a couple of weeks, we had the whole album down, and we ended up planning a little backyard party. There's these friends of ours that have like a kind of a party house, jam house, and they would do these backyard parties and stuff in their backyard. And so we just did that, you know, kind of a free show, you know, you know, it wasn't even Terrorizer. We actually started with, it was Sandoval, Harrison, Molina. That was like our original name. Mm-hmm. And it was actually Gutter Christ, if you know Gutter. He was the one who kind of forced us into using Terrorizer, because we played that Jersey Death Fest. That was one of our first paid gigs. And he ended up putting Terrorizer on the t-shirt. And Pete kind of just relented. He's like, all right, we'll call it Terrorizer, you know. And that's how that ended up happening, you know. So it was like, it wasn't really us calling it Terror. It was the fans and him more or less pushing us to do it, you know. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we ended up with Gunter. And that's kind of how we ended up doing all those tours, you know, we did with Gunther Ford. And eventually got the album deal and wrote the album. That took a lot longer at first, because Pete wanted to, like, I don't know, he was just critical of everything. But by the end of it, you know, he would just let me do my thing, and I would come at him with finished songs more or less. And he would learn them, and, you know, he'd throw his own little fills in, but he was really working with me, you know, and like, it was really fun for my creativity, you know, just because I could do my thing, you know, and not, you know, because he's a drummer, I could kind of push his limits, so to speak, you know, and like see what, you know, what he could handle and what he could, like, and it just, I would say everything up to the album, man. It was real smooth, and we got along great and everything. He really did work with me, and go the extra mile, and that album, it's just some of his best drum work, because he was just pushing hard and playing hard, and he was into it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So I guess to
answer your question real quick, though, it was a challenge for me to kind of, like, when I first had to, start, like, I would say the obituary thing, when I had to start worrying about amps and, like, understanding the settings and this, keeping 6 strings in tune in a hot, environment and things like that. It was, like, definitely presented new challenges, and it was,
your comfort zone on your monitor.
It wasn't just plug and play like I had hoped. It got that way, but at first it was like, oh, what am I doing? Like, how do I get this thing to work right? What am I doing? Understanding the chain of the pedals and stuff like that. Learning all those little, normal guitar players learned when they were younger, but I just never had to, because I wasn't playing like that. I was playing guitar because I always wrote, Monstrosity. Yeah, but I just never to that level. I never had to worry about it.
What did you personally find as a bigger challenge, the drums or the guitar or the bass or singing?
Well, singing's a whole nother thing, but
right.
Drums is like definitely physically harder. It's more of a pain in the ass because it's so much to keep up with when you got to show up at a show and you got all this stuff laying around and you got to deal with it and set it up and tear it down, and multiple trips to the car, and it's and you're sweating bullets. It's just it's definitely more of a physical thing. But with the guitar, that's more fun because you're up front, and like I'm all about doing the head banging and things like that. So I wasn't just sitting there. I was sweating bullets doing that too. It wasn't the easy street totally, like I kind of envisioned.
Yeah.
I guess we'll kind of end it where what you got going on in the future. And I remember the last time we spoke, you were kind of telling me about some new stuff in the works. So could you kind of fill us a little bit?
Yeah. So actually, we started about 2 years, 2.5, not quite 2.5 years, 2 years ago for sure. It was like March of 2 years ago. I did the drums over in Sanford, Florida at Audio Hammer, and then we ended up doing some shows. We did the guitars over that summer and into the fall, and then we ended up going to Europe in January of that next January, and then we went to South America in March. So we kind of got sidetracked doing the touring business, and then finally we did the vocals at Morrisound, and we did some of the guitar solos at Morrisound and stuff, and then we've kind of taken that all back over to Sanford, Florida, and he's actually this week started mixing the first song, and I'm going over there Thursday, and we're kind of going to finalize the mix, and then from there he'll do the rest of the songs and kind of do it over the internet, send me the songs, and which is like a total such a relief from with Morrisound. When we would mix at Morrisound, I would go in there and be in there all week, and you would hear it being built from scratch, and once they start turning those EQs, what you think sounds great and all that, it kind of goes out the window, and I learned that on the first album because we had mixed Imperial Doom. We had done a remix, and we ended up going back and mixing everything kind of more or less in a day. And what sounded great in the studio on the big speakers, once we got it to like our buddy's house and listened to it, it was like night and day. It was like, man, it's all thin, and where are the guitars, and just so being able to now through the internet, okay, I can hear it on a pair of speakers that I'm familiar with,
Mhm.
and it's I can really hear what it sounds like instead of being like in the room all day long and just all these frequencies going this way and that way, and you kind of get confused of what it even is.
Right.
So it makes it nice being able to do it that way. It takes a lot of the hard work out of it, as far as just being in there for hours and hours and hours.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
sure. Yeah, because after a while, your ears, you're hearing the same shit.
Exactly. You don't even know what you're hearing anymore.
That's
Basically, we got the new album, and we're just trying to wrap that. We've been trying to wrap it up forever, but it's just one of those things. The studio schedules with the guys. Mark Van Erp flew down, and we did like 4 different weekends to do the bass, and so scheduling all that took forever. Doing the vocals, we spent a lot of time doing that. So, everything just takes longer than you think it's going to take, but it is, all the recording's definitely done, and we're just now just starting the mix. So hopefully by, end of July, we should have it wrapped up. That's kind
It's
of
with
my
Metal Blade too, because the last record was with Metal Blade, if I remember correctly, right?
Presumably we'll see, but at this point, I wouldn't see why not. But,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Yeah, I can't wait to hear it. And it's cool you're working, at Morris now too, after all these years.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. Yeah, man.
yeah,
Well,
I'm pretty happy with it, for what we have so far. So
cool, man. Awesome, man. Well,
one of my things is that I like to, at least have 3 or 4 songs written for the next one. So
cool, man.
I
Yeah.
talk
And I guess
over each other here.
you guys, any touring in the future or anything planned for that, or?
We have a show in Texas with Dismember in August,
Oh, that's right. I
and then
saw
we
that.
have a show in California with Dismember in October.
Wow, that'll
California
be killer.
Death Fest.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, man, I can't wait to to hear the new stuff, and hopefully we get to run into you sometime soon, and yeah, like I said, I can't wait to hear the new record, and I know it's going to be killer. It's coming from you. It's going to be sick. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, and Roger, you got any questions
No,
or
I
anything?
appreciate it. It was great meeting you and talking with you tonight, and I appreciate you coming on also.
Yeah. If you just want to hang for a second, I'll let you know when this is going to air and all.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, before we go, did you want to give your schedule and the show schedule for the next couple of weeks?
Oh, well, yeah. So I'll be gone for about, I don't know, over 2 weeks. I'll be in Europe. So, Roger will have a few little guitar little things coming out while I'm gone, and
We
get
think,
back on. Yeah.
depending on Roger's computer editing abilities.
Yeah, we'll have another episode, and I would love to have Lee on again. Maybe we can do a little part 2. Get into some of the other stuff that he's done, which he's done a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. All
Cool,
right.
man. All right. Cheers.